So my next question is to either both of you or either one of you. The Red Army had a high casualty rate as compared to Finland. What impact did the perception of its performance in the Winter War have on World War II, perhaps on Hitler, if any? And of course, we can also link this to modern propaganda. So which one of you would like to address this? I'm not sure which one is more. Okay, let's go with Andrei.
Okay, this is one of the major toposes, which are when people still talk about the Finnish Winter War. They mostly talk about casualty rates of the Red Army. Like everything else is simply ignored or put under the rug. Only this is matter, and this is one very specific, I would say, Anglo-centric perspective, which completely ignores the casualty rates of the other side or the damages incurred on the other side. The only thing which is important for the Anglo-Americans is how many Russians are killed in the process. Now, talking about actual casualty rates, it's a little bit difficult because there have been uses and misuses of different sources and different numbers. Now, in the aftermath of the war, I think it was Molotov, I think, that officially came up with the numbers, which were about 50,000 killed Red Army soldiers, which was obviously not in correlation with the actual casualty rates. However, this figure was being used for a long while because it was obviously inconvenient to admit larger casualties. However, after Stalin's death, during the Khrushchev's anti-Stalinist posture, he did completely U-turn, and he mentioned, I think at one point he mentioned officially 270,000 killed Red Army soldiers. And his memoirs, he talked even about million or something like that. So it's completely ludicrous. The actual number is probably somewhere in between. I think that most of various sources which have been appointed with, the Georgy Krivoshev estimate of about 125,000 is probably the most correct, give or take, maybe 130, maybe 140, but we're talking about this kind of numbers. A large number of them weren't even the casualties of actual combat, but people who froze to death when they lost logistic lines and were being cut off and simply froze in such conditions. It's still a huge number. I mean, this is the larger number of people killed in 3 months of combat, a little bit over 3 months, than right now in almost three years from the Russian side, speaking, in Ukraine. So the intensity of it was quite high. On the other hand, the Finns also didn't have easy going. I mean, it wasn't one-sided affair. They officially acknowledged 25,000 or so people killed in combat, which is actually considerably higher according to proportion of troops and proportion of population when you compare Finnish and Soviet Union population. So it hurt them more in relative numbers in a big picture, because Soviet Union being, I think it was something like, maybe Alexander would know better, something like 170 million people at the time was inhabitants of Soviet Union. I mean, obviously they could much more easily replenish population losses from the existing population, which was proportionally young at the time. Then the Finns could replace their 25,000 people. Nevertheless, it was still a considerable amount of casualties, and the whole propaganda picture, which was formed from the journalists coming from the West covering the war, it had a significant impact of the perspective on Soviet Union, especially from the German side. Hitler actually did made a comment that I think it is in Hitler's tabletop conversations that he said that well, if the small Finns, as the British propaganda presented them, if they managed to kick Russians in the face in such a manner, imagine what we will do when we eventually invade. So on the other hand, I mean, this is a two-edged sword. On the other hand, it it emboldened Hitler to attack, but he would attack anyway, sooner or later. Maybe not in 1941, maybe it would be in 1942 or 43, but it was going to happen anyhow. On the other hand, the relatively poor performance, especially in this first phase of the war of the Red Army, sort of sobered up Stalin, and this prompted him to release large number of officers which were purged from the army, but they were still alive. They were either in gulags, or they was in house arrests, or civilians or something like that. So they were all immediately brought back into the army, and it prompted the more serious approach to current reforms, which were already in place. So it also meant that the Red Army was in a better position in 1941, when the war actually broke out, than it would be otherwise without the Finnish war. So it's difficult to give like an objective assessment of which one of those two side effects was more impactful, because the war would happen anyhow, and as I said, the Red Army was in a better position than it would be without the war, casualties aside. But there's this very strange obsession with dead Russians especially from the British media, which is obviously even today very much alive. And I remember back in 2008, there has been, when the thing was happening in Georgia, there was this very strong reminiscence. Very often there would be referencing the Finnish war, like the Finns won the war and not lost it. And this is kind of a ideological model from especially from the British, which they try to impose on various different East European or Caucasian countries as I don't know, like it's a good thing to poke a bear and get mauled in turn. I mean, nobody will. Finns lost it, and they lost manpower, they lost the territory, and they were lucky that Stalin did have a sort of respect for them, and for Mannerheim apparently personally, in a Second World War, and that they weren't punished even much more worse. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Maybe Alexander will want to continue on with Second World War.
Yes, thank you for explaining that, and we love to call out British propaganda on this channel or anywhere where I can open my mouth, because that's one of my hobbies, even more so than American propaganda in some cases.